So as we continue to cover the Epstein files, there is something that keeps on percolating to the top of the discourse, and that is Jeffrey Epstein's non-prosecution agreement from the mid-2000s down in Florida. And I got it here. And by the way, for the longest time, it was secret. Like, nobody knew what the terms were. It was totally confidential, which in and of itself is just a disgrace, right? The fact that it wasn't for public consumption for a long time. It just kind of goes to show that they really meant for it to be done in secrecy, without public eyes to scrutinize the worth of it. And we know that the victims had no input in it, right? They had absolutely no buy-in, and they were the most important people from whom the prosecutors should have heard and were actually required to do so as federal prosecutors. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But I wanted to take the time with all of you to go through the non-prosecution agreement. It has so many glaring things that I think are big tells that just go to show that the players that were involved in the Epstein-Maxwell kind of sphere were very important ones. Big players. Money, wealth, power, influence. And the reason why is there is no way in hell any of us would ever get the benefit of a deal like this unless we were Jeffrey Epstein. And it also goes to show that as we sit here in August of 2025, the active concealment of the people whose hands are dirty, the people who were a part of the sexual abuse of children, that they remain completely unscathed. Because it is an inescapable reality. The only two people that have had to face the criminal consequences of their involvement in this child sex trafficking, child sex abuse predation is just Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. There have been no other criminal prosecutions, either by the feds or by the states, of anyone else. And it is absurd to think about it. In another video, I covered the subpoena ducis tecum that was just sent to the estate of Jeffrey Epstein. And let me be clear, the window of time within which they are seeking information goes as far back as January of 1990. 1990. So the suggestion, and I don't think I need to remind you that Epstein died in 2019. Note, I didn't say he killed himself. He died in 2019. So there is a huge expanse of time for crimes to be perpetrated by people other than Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein. But this non-prosecution agreement remains incredibly relevant and incredibly powerful as a tool, as ammunition for Ghislaine Maxwell to escape ultimate culpability for what she did. This lionization by MAGA Trump, the Trump DOJ led by Pamela Joe, this idea, this elevation of this woman as some kind of truth teller is disgusting. I mean, it makes my blood boil and it makes my stomach turn to think that anybody would consider Ghislaine Maxwell to be a honest broker when it comes to her own criminal involvement in Jeffrey Epstein's world. She was not just a facilitator. She was not just a groomer. She has been convicted of being a literal participant in the sexual abuse of little girls. Some as young as 14 years old. So the idea that she could relate to the feds, to Donald Trump's personal counsel, Todd Blanche, to FBI agents, to anyone, frankly. You don't even have to be law enforcement. The idea that she could be relating truth about Epstein and other people's involvement in Epstein's world is the dumbest shit I have heard in a long time. And the fact that the Trump DOJ thought it was appropriate to release her audio and the transcript of her hanging out doing basically, I mean, literally, Todd Blanche and Ghislaine Maxwell on those audios sound like two hens over cocktails doing each other's nails and braiding each other's hair. It was the least confrontational meeting, interview, immunized hanging out that I have ever heard. It underscored what a shitty lawyer Todd Blanche is, because if that is anything close to his litigation skills, he needs to go back to law school. But it also shows that all of this is a part of a concerted plan to continue to cover up people's involvement, including convicted felon Donald Trump's. Why? Need I remind you? A week before Todd Blanche went and sat down with Ghislaine Maxwell for 2 days in a row for 9 hours, they fired Maureen Comey, federal prosecutor who was the lead on the trial team that prosecuted Ghislaine Maxwell, that went to trial, the person who could actually press Ghislaine Maxwell with the facts and the evidence to show that she is not telling the truth, to show that she is violating her immunity deal. Todd Blanche told Ghislaine Maxwell, if you lie, you can actually be prosecuted for it. I haven't seen an indictment against Ghislaine Maxwell for lying to federal agents, have you? But we know that the objective facts and evidence show clear as day that Ghislaine Maxwell was lying to Todd Blanche when she met with him a few weeks ago. So the reason why I took that kind of quick trip down memory lane concerning Ghislaine Maxwell is she's invoking this non-prosecution agreement as the gospel and as her get out of jail card. Literally, this is her get out of jail card. But let's walk through this agreement together, because there's some stuff in here that I really want you to know. And before we do so, very quickly, if you don't mind, I've got the filings with the Supreme Court of the United States. Now, the Supreme Court hasn't taken up Ghislaine Maxwell's appeal yet. So if other people have told you that's happened, they don't know what they're talking about. The Supreme Court has not taken up Ghislaine Maxwell's appeal yet. But what Ghislaine Maxwell is asking the Supreme Court to do is the following. She's asking the court to decide whether a United States attorney's promise made on behalf of the, quote, United States binds the entire United States versus just binding the Southern District of Florida. Another argument that she raises is this. In exchange for Epstein's guilty plea and other penalties and concessions in this non-prosecution agreement, the United States agrees it will not institute any criminal charges against any potential co-conspirators of Epstein, including but not limited to, and identifies 4 names that we're going to get into. Maxwell is relying upon the non-prosecution of the co-conspirators of Jeffrey Epstein to be able to get out of jail. And she's asking the Supreme Court of the United States to take up her appeal to decide whether that non-prosecution agreement, as drafted, would apply to her. I am pleased to hear that the former United States Attorney for the Southern District of Florida, Alex Acosta, has now agreed to appear before House Oversight for a deposition that will be occurring behind closed doors, but that Democrats like Robert Garcia will be there to be able to question Alex Acosta about the terms of this deal. As a lawyer, I can tell you this deal is one of the worst drafts of a deal I've ever read. And when we get to the part about the co-conspirators non-prosecution, I got to tell you, I'm no conspiracy theorist, but I do believe that it was intentionally drafted in a way that would allow people like Ghislaine Maxwell to ultimately contest whether they can be prosecuted. So let's start with page 1. Here's the big red flag. What's the title? In re Investigation of Jeffrey Epstein. Nope, it doesn't actually have, if I may, excuse me. It doesn't have a style, meaning it doesn't show prosecution, United States of America versus Jeffrey Epstein, right? It just says in re, basically in regarding to or about the investigation of Jeffrey Epstein. Non-prosecution agreement. It appearing that the state attorney's office, and they were referring to the Palm Beach County State Attorney's Office throughout this document, the state attorney's office has charged Epstein by indictment with solicitation of prostitution in violation of Florida Statute Section 796.07. It appears that the U.S. Attorney's Office and the Federal Bureau of Investigation have conducted their own investigation into Epstein's background and offenses that may have been committed by him against the United States from in or around 2001 through in or around 2007, September, including knowingly and willfully conspiring with others known and unknown to commit an offense, that is, to use a facility or the means of interstate commerce or foreign commerce to knowingly persuade, induce, or entice minor females to engage in prostitution. knowingly and willfully conspiring with others, known and unknown, to travel in interstate commerce for the purpose of engaging in illicit sexual conduct with minor females. Using a facility or means of interstate or foreign commerce to knowingly persuade, induce, or entice minor females to engage in prostitution. Traveling in interstate commerce for the purpose of engaging in illicit sexual conduct with minor females. So the first two federal offenses are the conspiracy ones, conspiring with others, known and unknown. It's not just Ghislaine Maxwell, people. And then the next two charges are the actual substantive crimes, right? Not the conspiracy ones, the ones that they're actual inducement of the prostitution and the traveling in interstate for the prostitution. And then lastly, the fifth one, knowingly recruiting, enticing, and obtaining by any means a person, knowing that that person was less than the age of 18 years old and would be caused to engage in a commercial sex act. So it says here, it appearing that Epstein seeks to resolve globally his state and federal criminal liability, and the interests of the United States, the state of Florida, and the defendant will be served by the following procedure. What about the damn victims? You don't think the victims wanted to be able to have a say in this? How did this deal benefit the victims? Well, we know it didn't. And we know that in doing so, this deal violated the Victims' Crime Rights Act because they sued and they sought to unwind the deal and they were unsuccessful in doing so. But notice here, it doesn't say that the interests of the victims are served by this non-prosecution agreement. Therefore, on the authority of R. Alexander Acosta, U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Florida, prosecution in this district for these offenses shall be deferred in favor of prosecution by the state of Florida, provided that Epstein abides by the following conditions and the requirements of this agreement set forth below. After timely fulfilling all the terms and conditions of this agreement, no prosecution for the offenses set out on pages 1 and 2, which were the 5 that I just read with you, nor any other offenses that have been the subject of the joint investigation of the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office, nor any offenses that arose from the federal grand jury investigation that was instituted in this district. Those charges will be dismissed. Sorry. Here are the terms. Epstein shall plead guilty to the indictment that is pending in the 15th Judicial Circuit in Palm Beach County, charging him with 1 count of solicitation of prostitution. And also he will plead guilty to an information in Palm Beach County with the offense that requires him to register as a sex offender, that is the solicitation of minors to engage in prostitution. Epstein shall be sentenced to consecutive terms of 12 months and 6 months in county jail. He shall be sentenced to a term of 12 months of community control after he does those 2 terms. I want to stop right here and I want to talk about why the jailing here was really important. Because the jailing here was really not jail. He was allowed to go on work release, so we know he went to some posh, cushy glass office in the sky during the day, accompanied by deputies that he had to pay for out of pocket, because with wealth means, right? Wealth means not only the ability to do this horrific sex trafficking scheme for years, but it also means that you can buy yourself work release, right? But in Florida, when you go to jail, jail is less than 12 months of incarceration. When you go to Florida prison, that's 366 days and up, okay? So anything less than 366 of days of incarceration is jail. 366 days and up is prison. So technically, if you're looking at 18 months of incarceration, you should be going to Florida prison. And let me tell you something. Jail, prison, not a joke, not even an hour. But jail is considerably better than Florida prison. I'm telling you right now. Hands down. You can actually ask anybody who's actually served time. You'd rather be in jail than in prison. So Epstein gets the benefit of 12 months, then 6 months in the county jail, instead of doing 18 months in Florida prison. That's yet another benefit that Epstein got as a result of this deal. And then he got a year of community control. That means house arrest. So instead of doing 18 months in jail, in Florida prison, or 18 months in a year, right? In Florida prison, he got 18 months in county jail, followed by a year of house arrest. Paragraph 7. The United States shall provide Epstein's attorneys with a list of the individuals whom it has identified as victims. So the U.S. is was giving to Epstein's attorneys a list of the victims that it knew about after this agreement was signed and after Epstein was sentenced. Upon the execution of this agreement, the United States, in consultation with and subject to the good faith approval of Epstein's counsel, the U.S. shall select an attorney representative for these persons who shall be paid for by Epstein. Epstein's counsel may contact the identified individuals through that representative. I'm gonna break this down for you because this is important. Epstein's victims, as identified by the United States, their information was provided to the lawyers for Epstein. Epstein's lawyers had to approve a person who would serve as the representative for these victims, and that person would be paid by Jeffrey Epstein. You want to talk about some conflicts of interest? The United States has no objections to Epstein to self-report to begin his sentence no later than January 4th of 2008, assuming that he is sentenced no later than October 26th of 2007. How many criminal defendants get that luxury of self-reporting? Number 13, page 5. The parties anticipate that this agreement will not be made part of any public record. If the United States receives a Freedom of Information Act request or any compulsory process commanding the disclosure of the agreement, it will provide notice to Epstein before making that disclosure. The parties anticipate that this agreement will not be made part of any public record. The act of concealment, the cover-up, began as late as 2007. It's been going on for almost 20 years, people. So in the span of 20 years, how is it possible that the only people that have faced justice have been Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell? When we know for a fact that there are so many third parties implicated in this. How is that possible? Unless this act of concealment was being funded by and facilitated by people with money, means, power, and influence. Now, here's the co-conspirators clause that Ghislaine Maxwell is relying upon to get her out of jail. If Epstein successfully fulfills all of the terms and conditions of this agreement, the United States also agrees it will not institute any criminal charges against any potential co-conspirators of Epstein, including but not limited to Sarah Kellen, Adriana Ross, Leslie Groff, or Nadia Marchenkova. Further, upon execution of this agreement and a plea agreement with the Palm Beach County State Attorney's Office, the federal grand jury investigation will be suspended and all pending federal grand jury subpoenas will be held in abeyance unless and until the defendant violates any term of this agreement. Both parties agree to maintain their evidence, specifically evidence requested by or directly related to the grand jury subpoenas that have been issued, and including certain computer equipment, inviolate until all the terms of this agreement have been satisfied. In other words, this non-prosecution agreement put the obligation on both sides to keep all of the evidence secret. I want to go back just for 1 minute to this co-conspirators language, because what Ghislaine Maxwell is saying, that it says here that the United States, because it doesn't say the United States Southern District of Florida. Maxwell is saying because it says the United States agrees it will not institute any criminal charges against any potential co-conspirators of Epstein, including but not limited to, and then it lists those 4 names. It didn't need to list her name, is what Maxwell's saying. She's saying it's any potential co-conspirator, including but not limited to. And so it was expansive. And the reason why I'm saying that this is, as a lawyer, and you don't have to be a criminal lawyer, by the way. Any lawyer would tell you that this is really shitty the way that this was drafted, because it is so broad in terms of interpretation that you could drive a Mack truck through it. And it was done, in my opinion, intentionally to benefit people like Ghislaine Maxwell. So in the event she does end up being a part of an indictment or investigation criminally for her involvement in the Epstein world, she'd be able to cite to this. And now listen, let me be clear. She has tried this gambit in trial court in the Southern District of New York, as well as the Federal Appeals Court in New York, and she's lost on it every single time. No judge has agreed with her at all that her interpretation of this clause in this agreement means that she should not have been indicted and tried for her criminal culpability for myriad reasons, but nobody has bought that argument. But remember, this is a Trump Supreme Court with an uber conservative 6. And if they were looking for an excuse to give her relief, and if Trump didn't want to go so far as to give her a pardon or a commutation because of the fallback, no, the pushback he would get from MAGA, I've written about this. I've talked about this. This is a way by which Maxwell gets out of this scot-free. And let's fast forward to what we call the signature pages. So signature pages are exactly what they say about it, right? So this signature page says, by signing this agreement, Epstein asserts and certifies that the above has been read and explained to him. Epstein hereby states he understands the conditions of this non-prosecution agreement and agrees to comply with them. And whose name is right there? R. Alexander Acosta, U.S. Attorney. And it also has A. Marie Villafana, Assistant U.S. Attorney, Jeffrey Epstein, who signed, Gerald Lefcourt, Esquire, counsel to Jeffrey Epstein, and Lily Ann Sanchez, Esquire, attorney for Jeffrey Epstein. And then it was signed in parts, which is legal, by the way. Lefcourt's signature, Sanchez's signature. I don't have the U.S. Attorney's Office, the AUSA signature. I will post this document. I want you to take the time to go through it. We wouldn't get the benefit of this, but the powers that be wanted Epstein to get the benefit of this. And I firmly believe that the benefit of this was not only on its face so evident, that he wouldn't go to federal prison, he wouldn't be prosecuted by the feds, he wouldn't even go to Florida prison. This document, I submit to you, gave him license to continue to do the abuse that he did. End of story. But for the feds going after Jeffrey Epstein back in 2007, with a grand jury that had already been impounded in Florida to do it, with a drafted indictment all ready to go, just pull the trigger, let's go on this indictment against Epstein down here in Florida. It was already ready to go, people. The feds stood down. The Palm Beach County State Attorney also stepped in. By the way, the Palm Beach County State Attorney has his own culpability in this. But because remember, this stuff would not happen but for the highest echelons of authority, not only at the state attorney's office, but at the U.S. Attorney's Office, which is why money, means, power, influence was involved in this. And I'm not just talking Jeffrey Epstein's money. I'm talking external factors and voices, very loudly and yet very quietly, whispering in people's ears to make this go away, to not make the evidence public, to not make the existence of this document and agreement public in the first instance. The justice that is being sought by the victims of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell has in some ways been elusive, and I guess in some ways has been achieved through the conviction and sentencing of Ghislaine Maxwell. But there are so many other perpetrators that have yet to face justice. And I know the wheels of justice, they do grind slowly. But I'm a believer, people. I am a very real believer in the value and the strength and the integrity of the rule of law. And that when we are able to show how accountability is still within our reach, that we have to continue to be relentless about making sure that we drive forward to get that accountability. Be mad, be outraged, and demand that accountability. And I'll see you on the other side. Katie Phang here. We launched the Katie Phang News Channel in partnership with the Midas Touch Network so we could bring you the latest in legal and political news. Straight, no chaser. So if you're a fellow truth teller, hit that subscribe button and share the word about this channel so we can build a high information America together.